Hey, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, depending on when you have tuned in to this edition of Hypnosis Week with myself, Alex Williams-Smith by birth, but better known to many of you in the hypnosis world as Jonathan Royle, the British bad boy of hypnosis of magicalguru.com. And I'm delighted to have, yes, the gentleman I'm about to introduce you to is a trained hypnotherapist. Yes, he is. However, that is not the main reason I've asked him to come on the show. It's because, as those who studied my elite hypnosis bootcamp will know, a lot of my views go against what the so-called respectable, I'm using that term loosely, respectable clinical hypnotherapy trainings will teach you. Hence, I also do stage hypnosis shows. Now, a lot of people say that's complete and utter cobblers. And on the one hand, I say, yes, it is cobblers. It gives people an excuse to do daft things on stage. But from another angle, there's an underlying psychology that when you understand it and use it, can take people further into doing things they wouldn't have normally done, even using it as an excuse, and take them to a realm where there's a point of no return and they end up doing things that, thank God they've got the excuse afterwards. The hypnotist made them do it because otherwise they'd been mortally embarrassed. I'm also a believer that hypnotherapy, people say you cannot make people do things against their will, their morals or their values with hypnosis. And my key in a sentence to that is that you've not been taught properly then, quite frankly, because Delavar, aka Gordon Mee, who taught me, and his parents, his grandparents and his great-grandparents were hypnotists or mesmerists, as it was called back then. In their books, going back well over 100 years, they categorically tell you how you can use hypnosis to create mind-controlled assassins, for example. And Dell's family did indeed work with the British Army. So I was drawn to the gentleman I'm about to introduce you to a few years ago now, when I got more heavily involved in wanting to make vocal my findings and thoughts on, effectively, mind control. Even if you're a clinical hypnotherapist, I would hope you've heard of things like MK Ultra. A lot of you probably think, oh, that's all conspiracy theory nonsense. We'll get to that in a minute. But arguably two of the best books I have read, in terms of if you've not read anything else and you want to get an overview, an understanding, an insight and guidance on where to look further for more information, because that's the key. Don't believe one source. Go out, look and research and come to your own conclusions. But two of the best books you will find have very similar titles, except one's volume 1, one's volume 2. They're called Your Thoughts and Not Your Own, volumes 1 and volume 2, by the gentleman who is on the screen, the man himself, Mr. Neil Saunders. Good day to you, sir.
How are you, man? You're right.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Look, you've not just got those two books out. You've got an excellent book called Cambridge Analytica, The Data Deception and the Web of Popularism, which I'm going to ask you to tell us a bit about shortly. And one that my wife's in the process of reading called Now's the Only Thing That's Real, the true story of your insights into Charles Manson and all that. So you've got there's a wide area there, but they've all got an interlinking thing.
Yeah.
Interlinking theme. And I put it under that umbrella of mind control. So to get started, for the viewers at home who may not have encountered you before because they're clinical hypnotherapists or whatever, how did you get into this and publishing these books and appearing on? I mean, you've got a series that's just come out called The Programme on iconic.com, a TV series that's on a web platform. How did you get to the point that you're doing this? How did you get involved in it all?
Do you know what, right? It was a bit weird how I sort of found it. I mean, I was always interested in what could be termed sort of conspiracies, like on a sort of hobby basis. I was like interested in JFK and like, Loch Ness. There's different levels, isn't there? Like I think of things like Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and Champ and all that sort of, cryptozoology and stuff like that, and ghosts. I think that's kind of fun. Like, do you know what I mean? It's interesting. It's a bit wacky. Then there's sort of other things like JFK, which are getting a bit more sort of serious and stuff like that. And then there's all the other things, which are sort of like declassified military experiments and stuff like that. How I actually got into it, it's a bit weird, Jonathan. I was trying to bribe a friend of mine to start a punk band, and so I did some songs, like some sort of like ska tracks, and I put Aldous Huxley talking over the top of it as like a sample. Okay. And I sent it up to Richard D. Hall because he was doing a music thing. And the whole point of it was just so I could convince my mate to go, see, he likes it. Come and sing in a band with me. but basically, Richard got in touch with me and says, what is this stuff? Like, this seems quite interesting. And just asked me to sort of like put together like half an hour's worth of stuff, and it just sort of all went from there. Like, to be quite honest, like I sort of like I'd collected a few bits of bobs just out of interest, and then just started sort of collecting it all together and getting like a sort of like a file until I had enough to sort of to put in a book, really, basically. So it just sort of happened. It was very strange. And then some people.
What's your background before that? Because with your books, it's clear to me that you've got an academic background.
Yeah.
The way you cross-reference stuff and provide the evidence and stuff.
Well, I did a degree in psychology. Well, it was technically humanities, but the point is that basically I had enough points to go on to do the sort of next level of psychology and become a psychologist. And I was going to do that, but it was like it was a 2-year course. And so whilst I was waiting for this to start, I decided to learn hypnosis. And I did it by the sort of, I shan't mention the name, but one of the sort of very popular people where they do like script work and stuff like that. And it was quite interesting. I just thought it would just be like another sort of string to my bow. But then I knew a guy who did curative hypnotherapy. And I just had a chat with him because I was like, look, this script work, it doesn't seem... dependent on the quality of the script, obviously, like it didn't seem to be sort of like dealing with the sort of underlying cause or anything like that. So I was rather drawn to the different type to curative hypnotherapy, which I'm sure you know is basically like it's a kind of regressive thing where you basically find the underlying cause and the reason why they think of themselves like this.
Yeah, also called a lot of viewers may also know under the name sort of hypnoanalysis.
Or
psychoanalysis with they're hypnotized to find the root cause of the problem.
That's the one, or Les Arian. I think it was Helen Lester that actually started it, basically. So, but I didn't train under her. I trained under a bloke called Stephen Weil, and he was very, very good, and it just really interested me. Like, obviously, the thing I'm sure you were the same with hypnosis. Like, it all seems a little bit abstract and weird, and it is. It is totally weird until you see it actually work, and then you go, I have no clue why that worked, really, but it did. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you can see some fantastic sort of responses. One of the first people that I dealt with was just like crippling shyness, and obviously when we got to that point, you could physically see the abreaction happening in her body and stuff like that. And then she just when she opened her eyes, she's just a completely different person, just huge beaming smile and just like radiating confidence, and you could just see that something had happened. And it just when you actually sort of physically see that, you go, okay, there's something to this. You can. It is a strange thing. As you say, it sounds like you're making it up, but I'm sure you're the same. Like you've seen physical symptoms like eczema and psoriasis and nail painting.
Literally, you can sometimes almost visually see it.
Yeah, and it's bizarre, isn't it? It is so strange when you actually sort of get that thing. But I mean, this was one of the things that I was taught when I was told when I was taught it. It's like it's kind of like electricity. We understand sort of like the function of electricity, and if you do this, it'll do that. But nobody quite understands where it comes. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of mysteries to the concepts of electricity that we just go, don't know, but it works. So let's just use it. And it's not dissimilar with hypnosis. Like it is, as you say, it's a far more powerful tool than a lot of people sort of give credit for. But at the same time, it's interesting what you're saying about the thing. I'd really like to get hold of those books where they're talking about the mesmerism and stuff like that, because
you've got access to them, buddy. I'll just have to send you your username and password again.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah,
they're all inside the Elite Hypnosis Bootcamp.
Oh, fantastic! Mate, I'm crap online. Like I always miss everything. But this is it's one of those fine line things, isn't it? Because when you start saying to people that now you can do all sorts of crazy shit, like with hypnosis, like people might get a bit sort of nervous of going to see a practitioner or something like that. It does. I'm sure you'd agree with me that basically you can't do it by accident. You have to have a sort of intent there, and you have to probably disregard a lot of morals and ethics in order.
I think, Law, that if people were trained right, they would know that you can pretty much do all the things that they say you can't do.
Yes.
Or normal skills. And it's never put people off coming to see me.
No.
The fact that I'm so vocal. In fact, I get people that come to me and I charge over the odds. And when I ask them why they've chosen me,
it's because you've been honest.
Because I've told them that it's possible to create mind control assassins, for example, and surely it's possible to do that, and I know how to do that. Stopping them smoking or being scared of spiders should be a walk in the park.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's my understanding of it is it's about how you frame it, because basically the whole point of hypnosis to be successful is to get that level of rapport, obviously. And if you've got that level of rapport, trust, for want of a better word, people will do anything for you. And so it's one. Yeah, exactly.
It can be the other end of the scale as well if they're scared enough of you.
Yeah, precisely. But it's about sort of like using some sort of mechanism so that they have that authority where they basically don't question you. They're either so terrified of you that they basically do whatever you say, or they trust you so much that they know that you're going to do the right thing, so they do whatever you say. And in that case, you're dead right. You could convince people to do anything, like because they don't necessarily think that it's basically boils down to this. If you, as my therapist, has told me to shoot that person, I trust you. There must be something more to it. I'm obviously not going to shoot that person. It's something that there'll be a trick somewhere that basically I'm not aware of. And by the time you've shot the person, it's too late, basically.
That's one way. The way Dell describes it in Hypnotist Bible is you just take whatever might be against that person's moral code and values and find a way of making it so it's acceptable to them.
You're at war. That person.
8 years old playing cowboys and Indians. The person dressed.
Exactly. Yeah, you're shooting at a target. That was basically what happened with Sirhan. Sirhan, he thought that he was shooting at a rifle range at a fair, didn't he?
Yeah.
Or at least he said that, didn't he? So,
but I think the fact he said it, I strongly suspect that is probably what he did think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I don't think that he was the person that actually shot Robert Kennedy. I think it was what's his name, Eugene Cesar. He was the security guard, and when Robert Kennedy died, he was holding on to Eugene Cesar's tie, which was a clip-on tie, and he just so happened to be shot just behind the ear there with a caliber of gun that was exactly the same as Eugene Cesar's gun, and Eugene Cesar had accidentally discharged his gun during the melee. So he's blatantly obvious that this guy killed him. And I think, again, I'm pretty sure he had, I don't know exactly what it was, but this guy had some sort of connection to intelligence agencies or whatever. So it was a bit like, there's an angle there, basically.
So, I mean, right, hypnosis, just to clarify, for people at home, you'll be thinking of it as hypnotherapy because you do hypnotherapy, or you'll be thinking of it as stage hypnosis because you do stage hypnosis, or you'll be thinking of it under a different name, tapping, EMDR, or whatever, as being suggestion.
Yeah.
And yes, suggestion is a large part of it, but as I teach in the boot camp, and if anyone who's watching is in the boot camp will know, if not, look into that. I believe that hypnosis, my description of what hypnosis is, and then we can take it from there and see, do we agree, do we disagree, because it's fine to disagree, obviously. But I believe that with stage hypnosis, at its essence, you are providing an environment where the perception is that the stage hypnotist makes people do things against their will.
Yeah.
But people volunteer knowing this, which itself is an oxymoron. So in other words, when they volunteer, they are considering the possibility they could be made to do things they wouldn't normally do.
Yeah.
Therefore, in other words, they want the excuse It's like the karaoke syndrome.
So,
So they go through
totally.
a ritualistic, important process, and then they do the daft things, and afterwards they either come off stage, and during it they're getting applause and laughter that the hypnotist has said, that's showing how wonderful your powers of mind are, and it's praising their ego, making them feel good.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, they can go back and either say, I don't remember what took place, and then people will give them even more attention, telling them, oh, you did this, you did that.
Yeah.
And they'll go, did I? Really? When they full well, they bloody remember, really. They're just pretending. Or they go back and go, oh, I can remember. Did I really do that? I can remember it. I just couldn't stop myself. So again, all self-blame, shame, guilt, regret is removed from them, from what they did, and gives them the ability to get even more praise and adulation and attention from other people, something that human beings quite often are starved of.
Yeah.
Then therapy. Let's call him Dave. Dave's an alcoholic to a degree, drinks every day. Dave wakes up one morning and he thinks, you know what? I'm not going to drink anymore. And he never touches another drop. And after a few days of feeling a bit shit in the house, he has a shave, cleans himself up, he goes out and he bumps into people he's not seen for weeks, if not months, on the street. And they go, well, Dave, you're looking good. And Dave says, well, I've stopped drinking. Bloody hell, Dave, when did you do that? Oh, about a week ago. How did you do that, Dave? I just woke up one morning, decided I was going to stop, and that's it, as easy as that. And then he'll bump into his family and friends, same thing will go on, and they'll go, hang on, Dave, if it was that easy, why didn't you bloody do it sooner?
Yeah.
And then he'll feel bad because he's getting criticised, and that will cause relapse.
Yeah.
Because then he can prove it wasn't that easy. Whereas if he goes to a therapist like yourself, myself, or one of the viewers, goes through an important seeming ritualistic process with this perceived authority figure who's an expert in doing these things, pays a sum of money, attaches value to it, can then leave the office, do what he could have always done himself anyway, because there's nothing a hypnotherapist really does, unless they're using techniques like those we've alluded to, that wouldn't normally be possible off the person's own back. And he's got kind of a safety shield, because when people say, why didn't you do it sooner, Dave? He can go, well, I tried, but it didn't work for me. I needed the help of this therapist. So he's got the perfect excuse to offload all that self-blame, shame, guilt and regret for not having got off his ass and done it sooner.
Yeah, totally. Like, no, I agree with that 100%. I mean, I think that there are sometimes things where, like, instances of sort of reinforce things. Now, I agree with you, right? Because the power is always there with people. It's themselves that alter it. Okay. Sometimes I would say that there are things where people have got into a habitual thing and they don't quite understand why they're doing it, and you have to sort of do a bit of poking around to try and sort of like free that up, so to speak. But again, that's just because that's the way I've been taught, though. So, like, you know, I don't disagree with you at all. I just think that some people need that extra sort of layer of. It's all about framing, isn't it? This is the point. It's all about framing the way. And so
I think the real key is that at one end of that example I gave, the person stuck in a position of pain, for example, where the idea of changing for themselves is too painful. It's more pleasurable to carry on and have the problem. And a situation's got to arise where it becomes more painful to carry on that way and more pleasurable not to do it. So it's pain and pleasure. Two angles, which links in heavily with mind control stuff.
Well, actually, thinking about it, right, I've had a couple of clients who basically I've gone through this sort of like, you know, the regression bit and stuff. We've come to a cause and we've sort of reinterpreted the original thing. We've done that a couple of times, and we've actually seen this sort of physical reaction, and I've gone, oh, brilliant, fine, we've got this now, whatever. 2 weeks later, they've come back, and sort of almost at the end of my tether, I've gone, okay, fine, let's just do a bit of script work and just see what happens with that. And boom, that worked. Like, which is really strange, because that goes against the sort of what should logically have been the thing. So you're dead right. I think it's horses for courses, and people just need to have it positioned in such a way that it alleviates the responsibility for them. So yeah, if it works, it was great. If it doesn't work, it's not their fault, but it's more likely to work because essentially, as you say, they've put that investment into it and gone, look, I've spent this money, I've gone to this time, I've opened myself up, I've done the embarrassing things, so now I am worthy of reaping the reward, so to speak.
Now that's relevant to the majority of viewers of Hypnosis Week, because mainly stage hypnotists, hypnotherapists, mind therapists.
Yeah.
However, there's a reason why I've got you on this show, because I consider you to be the guy who is the expert in this area. That's great. That's using techniques with positive intent.
Yeah.
People or to entertain.
Mm-hmm.
But we can leverage that pain, pleasure scale at a far more extreme level to get people to do those things that they would normally want to do. Now, for viewers who probably won't be quite as aware as me, could you explain from your wonderful research and expertise, reasonably briefly, well, a bit of detail, but, you know, so that people actually go and buy the books, about MK Ultra and the Tavistock Hospital Institute and stuff?
Well, basically, Tavistock is the psychological institute, or it's the psychological establishment, and it started off as the what did it start? It started off as the Tavistock Clinic, and then sort of went through the Tavistock Institute, and now it basically is so pervasive that it's sort of like the umbrella British psychological establishment. So it's got fingers in all sorts of pies, and like it's one of these things where I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and like it's so broad, Tavistock, that I'm sure some people know people that work for them, and like it's not like the Umbrella Corporation in like Resident Evil or anything. It's not like every single person who works for this is evil or whatever. It's just, this is how things work. You know, if you want to start meddling with people's minds, you need to go to the very cream of the crop, and so the establishments basically get used for it. The long and short of it is that basically the Tavistock Clinic was originally it was Sir John Bowlby and John Rawlings Rees, and what they were interested in is basically dealing with shell shock, or post-traumatic stress disorder, as it would now be called. And what they basically noticed was that trauma coming from the trenches of the First World War, there'd be a huge amount of people who would basically come back and they would display like catatonic symptoms or complete withdrawal symptoms, or there was one very famous person who was basically, he'd become so sort of traumatized that he hadn't urinated for about 2 weeks. And there was a gentleman called William Sargent that basically gave him a huge dose of, I think it's sodium pentothal at the time, which is obviously one of these potential truth drugs. And the guy just started, just merrily just urinated where he was sitting. But this is what happened was essentially they started to notice that there's elements of trauma could be used in order to entrain people or in order to become more successful, and it's interesting that you made that distinction between the fear and the sort of like the authority as well, because that is really what they did. Not only did they sort of start to look at the application of things like how trauma could be used in interrogation scenarios or stuff like that, and then looking at how these drugs that would bring people out of post-traumatic stress disorder could sort of make them more malleable for these types of things and make them sort of more chatty and talkative. But also what they sort of expanded into was, well, how can we use the flip side of that? How can we use the sort of an authoritarian persona or the concept of sort of like a parental figure or something in like blue chip corporations or in the running of governments, essentially? So what they would do is they ran the whole gamut of not only sort of treatment, which was then sort of utilized into sort of espionage type materials, but they would also take this sort of concept of the understanding of, like, you know, psychological hierarchies, the idea of an authoritarian figure, the idea of how trauma can affect people, how basically in the concept of trauma they'll look to an authority figure to try and help them, and basically they were applying this. There's a guy called Kurt Lewin who was basically the chairman, or I forget his exact title, but he is in charge at Tavistock for a long time in the 30s. And he noticed this. Basically, he just felt that For the benefit of society, that what would be better is that basically if we just always give society low levels of trauma, be that sort of general aspirational things like, you know, your mortgage, your job, like not doing as well as people, not being as attractive as the next person, all of these things where you've got sort of comparative levels. What that does is it basically breaks people. It reduces them. Essentially what it does is it reduces their critical analysis, like so that they can't make decisions. And if you can't make decisions, you're more likely to either just basically do what is the established way of doing things, the normal way of doing things, or you go to an authority figure and say, will you please tell me how to do this? And it would appear that, although this sounds rather conspiratorial, that this was actually a genuine thing. In 1963, I believe it was, there was a gentleman called Eric Trist, and he was at the time again the head of the Tavistock Institute. And for some bizarre reason, he did a press conference in which he proclaimed that the whole point of what Tavistock was trying to do was create what he called social turbulence. And social turbulence is what we've just been saying, which is basically it's causing uncertainty in the general population to the point where basically, you know this because this is kind of how hypnosis works. Stick on some music, talk to them, blah, blah. Your brain's got a finite bandwidth. And if you can fill that, this is how mantras work, or like, you know, Buddhist incantations and all this types of stuff. It's filling that bandwidth of the brain so that basically you don't have any extra thoughts.
Sensory overload.
Exactly right. And the point is that when you've got this sensory overload, you can't be making decisions. Like you can't go into sort of complicated ruminations on this versus this and this argument versus this argument. You just need answers really, really quickly. And Eric Trist was basically saying that, well, this is the entire point of why the Tavistock Institute exists. And since the 20s and 30s, they've been sending out people called shock troops. Shock troops were basically people that sent either by John Rawlings Rees or Kurt Lewin. And they were starting up institutes all over the world, like Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, or Wharton School of Economics, or Esalen, or the Stanford Research Center. All of these very, very sort of prevalent, I mean, they're all in America, but like all over the world, essentially. And at the same time, they're doing the training of blue chip corporation leaders, teaching them to basically project authority and to have an element of fear and to strike fear into your workforce, because then basically they work harder. And then that exact same principle is applied to politicians and also to the teaching institutions, and then obviously the economic systems through places like Wharton, and the scientific establishment through places like Stanford. And this is how one sort of quite simple, really, at the base of it, obviously not in the application, but in the basis understanding of it, the trauma causes people to be more malleable. That which was found out by accident when they were treating people has just been able to be flipped on its head and applied not only on a sort of local level or a medical level or a psychological level, but on a worldwide societal level, to the point where basically the majority of civilized nations, for want of a better expression, run to the same sort of principles. You've got the sort of order, the establishment, the old tie network, this concept that's brought up that certain people are just your betters, this sort of social hierarchy, the way that you have to sort of get through this ziggurat or whatever through society. All of this, that's all been there already. Like, this is the point. You wait. It's kind of like that expression, which I'm going to get totally wrong, but like basically a fish doesn't know that he's in water because he's been there all its life. Like, because you're completely surrounded by these symptoms, this is always the way, this is always the way that this has been, this is the way that it should be, it seems right, you become used to that. Another example would be, was it Plato, where basically the people have spent their entire lives trapped in a cave staring at the pictures on a wall, and then all of a sudden somebody pushes out the rock at the front, and behind them the sun pours in, and they can see the entire real world out of them, and they don't want to move. They'd sooner stick and like with their little pictures, because it's what they're secure with, it's what they understand. It's not scary. It's This is the strange thing, and this is how nefarious people work, and I'm sure this is basically how it works. Again, it's about building rapport. It's that concept that, no, this is the way it is. Don't question it. This is society. This is the structure. This is the authoritarian figure. This is the teacher telling you the facts because it's correct. This is the boss telling you what to do because it's for the good of the company, not for the good of him. This is like, the government advisor telling you to do X, Y, and Z, and actually because it's not for you, it's for the economy. But basically, we're all, or the majority of people are basically under these impressions that these systems that are there, you don't question them. That's the point, because they are ubiquitous. You basically don't question them, and it's when you start to go, hang on, or when something doesn't work, that you start to pull on it and go, oh no, this is either not thought out at all, or it is thought out, but it's thought out and the intention is the opposite of what, rather than basically providing you with comfort and security, a secure environment. What it's actually doing is just basically stopping you from flourishing. But because you're in that sort of mindset, you get the impression that this is just the parameters of real life, so to speak.
Now that's something that what you just talked about for viewers at home. We elaborate on that, and by we I mean Neil, myself. Also, there's contributions from Gareth Icke, David Icke's son, and Dr. Robin Kelly, a medical GP who's also studied 5G. In the documentary Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, when this video goes out, below it, the first link you'll see will be Neil's website for the books. Below that will be a link where you can get the documentary, and we do go into these kind of things in depth, giving more examples of how the education system is indoctrination. It's about training you to believe certain things and repeat them on demand. So really what you're learning is to obey authority figures. How politics is the illusion of choice. It doesn't matter who you vote for. At the end of the day, they're going to do what people behind them pull the strings and tell them to do. But it gives you the illusion that you've had some choice in the matter. But also so you can have an argument with other people that you disagree with them, because there's stuff out there for you to agree and disagree about. It's dividing and conquering the nation and putting you in a state of, when you're arguing,
you're on teams.
You're in that. It's like the fight, flight, and freeze thing that comes up. When you're arguing, you also are occupied on that. So it's almost like hypnosis, fixated on your belief in that. You're distracted from everything else that's going on, and you become easier to manipulate as well.
That's something that I've noticed really recently, like as well, like and social media exacerbates that. Like, realistically, suddenly everybody's totally political. Everyone's either pro-Trump or anti-Trump or blah 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 blah. And I don't wish to be mean or anything, or come across as a know-it-all, although I'm sure I am doing, but you're not interested in politics, right? You don't even know who the Secretary of State is. You don't know anything about politics at all, right?
For the odd one of you watching this who perhaps have got degrees in politics and don't be interested, obviously you're in the minority.
The general population isn't actually that interested in politics. What has been done recently through the use of social media and through the use of basically very, very clever marketing schemes, Cambridge Analytica for one, which we'll probably come on to in a bit. People are invested in it. Like, suddenly, it's not like now. This is boiled down to several things. Like, all of a sudden, everybody thinks their opinion matters, right? And they've got to say something. They've got to get on social media because this platform exists, and they've got to say something. And what's bizarre is that people still don't. All of us still don't cope well with criticism of it. Like, mostly because there's no decorum on social media. So it's very rare for someone to say, I respect your opinion, but I actually think you're wrong on this. What they'll actually say is, oh my God, you're so stupid. Why do you think that? Now, all of that combined the audience that you've got, the pride that you get, and the dopamine response you get from putting something out and going, aren't I clever? The crushing amygdala response that you get when somebody says, no, you're not clever, you're a moron because you don't understand what you've read. All of that combined with the community that you get from being on a side has led to politics now is a fight in the same way that it would be a fight over whether Forest are better than Derby County. Of course they are. Like, than actually looking at the issues and seeing what would be the better outcome. Do you know what I mean? Like, nobody's debating Donald Trump and going, oh, I don't actually think that policy is fiscally sound. I think when you look at it, it's going to be really, really bad for this and because of X, Y, Z. Although I agree with the principle or whatever. Nobody's saying that. Everyone's going, yeah, Trump, or no, not Trump. And it's really as straightforward and simple as that, which is ridiculous. And people
animal behaviour instincts.
Yeah. But this is the thing, people have been convinced that these people who are not anything to do with you, for some reason everyone's focusing, well, Trump is a good example, Farage is a good example, where people have been convinced that these people are like, they're men of the people, they're just like me and you, it's the sort of person I go and have a pint with and blah blah blah. And it's not, it's a very carefully, Boris Johnson as well, it's a very, very carefully crafted public image, and the actual person is incredibly aristocratic, incredibly disrespectful of the general population, and the sort of person that wouldn't give you the time of day.
Anyone wants an up-to-date example, bearing in mind if you're seeing this in months or years to come, this was recorded on the 23rd of March 2020 during the coronavirus nonsense. Now, if you look at videos from that time of Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, find some videos on YouTube from the news from 2019 and see the buffoon with the big ridiculous hair and going and all this, and then look at videos from March 2020 regarding the coronavirus and his daily press conferences, and suddenly his hair's totally different. He hasn't got it all poked up in the air like he normally does, and his actions are different. It's because all of it is an act.
Yeah, oh, totally. I mean, like, Donald Trump is an act as well, but he's actually admitted this as well. It's a combination of him being very, very arrogant and actually playing a part. He's playing this persona of an evil sort of businessman that he was playing on The Apprentice. And to be fair, it's actually quite successful because, you know, people don't really know how to react to it. Well, there is no reaction because basically the whole point is he never apologises, he just moves on, never explains himself. But you're dead right. That's Boris Johnson has cultivated this image for years. Like, going on Have I Got News for You, like basically like years ago, which is a quiz show in the UK, where he came across as, oh, he's lovable, he's a lovable buffoon, look at the crazy ways that he talks and stuff like that. And again, and you're right, it's a very, very carefully constructed image. But the same thing you say with Donald Trump, people think, and Nigel Farage, people think that like he's their mate, like he's the sort of person that's going to do stuff. And what's been apparent from both of their responses, Trump and Johnson, it shows two things. One, their incompetence as a leader, completely incompetent. They're not fit for this type of job. They're not fit for this type of pressure, and they don't actually know how to respond. And the second thing is that basically they're taking orders from somebody, Dominic Cummings. In the case of
his name, I've got a note here because I mean Dominic Cummings effectively is the puppet master of Donald Trump and Boris Johnson, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much, basically. It's all that sort of, it's the same people. It's the New Frontiers think tank, and it's Gove, and like connected to Heritage Foundation and Coke Industries.
And Gove is linked to Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And therefore the media brainwashing.
Well, basically, Dominic Cummings came from the New Frontiers Foundation, which is a think tank, and that's basically connected with James Frayne. He was the director at it. James Frayne is Americans for Prosperity and Taxpayers Alliance, which is Coke Industries. So basically, that was going on in sort of like the early 2000s. Like this is what gets me about the thing. There is a series of think tanks and people who are directing policy and directing politicians. And it's people like Daniel Hannan and David Davis and Liam Fox and Boris Johnson and Michael Gove and all basically the people that we're seeing now. And in the same, and in America,
this fully, get Neil's book, Cambridge Analytica, The Data Deception and the Web of Popularism, from Neil Saunders, mindcontrol.com. It's easy to understand then.
Basically, the gist of it is that you've got these free market think tanks that have been since 1980. Since 1980 and since the Reaganomics, it's exactly the same people. They've been basically pushing Euroscepticism and free market economics, which basically boils down to no oversight of corporations and complete privatisation of British industry. And they managed to do a lot of that in the sort of 80s and 90s. You British Steel, Rolls-Royce, BAE, British Airways, all of this. There's a whole list of things that were privatised under Thatcher. And this was basically done as a favour to the Reagan, as a favour to the Heritage Foundation. And basically all these think tanks like New Frontiers and the Institute for Economic Affairs and the Institute for Free Trade, they're all connected and they're all basically doing the same thing. And this is borne out by the response of Trump and Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson to the coronavirus. Essentially, they have both resisted doing the things that would have been advised. Now, whether you think this is necessary is a completely different argument. Basically, what has been advised is really a lockdown. It's just basically trying to reduce social interaction and prevent the spread of the disease. And rather than do that, both of them have basically decided to try and save the markets.
I'll just clarify again. It's the 23rd of March 2020 when we're recording this. So if you watch it in a week's time and they have gone on lockdown, we're not getting things wrong. It's because it was recorded on the 23rd of March, but they should have done it by now, lockdown, really, shouldn't they?
There's a quote that's come out that's been denied, but the way it's been denied leads me to believe that yes, he absolutely 100% said this, and this is
got it here. Yeah, herd immunity, protect the economy, and if that means some pensioners die, too bad. Dominic Cummings is meant to have said that at a private meeting, and it leaked out yesterday. And surprisingly, not just from the whistleblowers, but surprisingly, the mainstream media actually picked up on it, and not just the Sunday Times, but other mainstream media picked up on it and published that as well.
Well, I mean, he's like, if he didn't say that, the argument would be, well, why have we been doing that then? Because that's exactly what you've been doing. So it's a bit of a coincidence that you didn't say that, but we did that anyway. Like, Dominic Cummings is just a monster. He's just an absolute pound shot Machiavelli. And this is the point. There's these systems behind. I mean, it is a form of hypnosis in essence, because basically you've got very, very wealthy people that are basically selling you a lie. And it's very, very, I mean, it's all connected to essentially the election of Trump and Brexit. And I hate to say this and oversimplified, but essentially it boils down to, they've told you they're going to get rid of brown people. and that's really what it is. And they're playing on lots of different things, fear, uncertainty, but also a degree of
Brexit was all about borders and and stuff.
It's jingoistic in as much as basically how it works is it makes the people feel frightened and superior at the same time. Like, they're frightened of the fact that they're potentially losing their culture or whatever, because that's the message that's been put across. But at the same time, it's kind of sort of encouraging, because basically what it's implying on a very subtle level is that you're superior to these people just by the virtue of being born white. And so it's a very, very seductive thing to do, particularly when you live in uncertain times, or perhaps don't have the security that you need. Again, this is not a new technique. This has been done time and time again. Like, basically appeal to poke the sort of fears appeal to the idea that basically you can get out of that and provide a scapegoat. And the whole point of providing a scapegoat, again, in all of these scenarios, is that basically it needs to fulfill two things. You need to know just enough about it to be frightened of it, not enough about it to argue against these facts that are put about. And these people need to be simultaneously powerful enough to destroy your entire way of life, and yet not powerful enough to have a platform where they can say, we're not going to do that. And so, but again, it's all these contradictory messages that all really boil down to this concept of the authority figure, and either believing the guidance that they're giving to you, or buying the fear that they're ramming down your throat. And it's, again, same mechanism over and over and over again. So it is, as you say, essentially a sort of mass hypnosis, or a mass
disorientation and confusion.
Yeah.
Which is one of the key when you get in that disorientated, confused state, or the freeze part of fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah.
Arguably, you go into the theta state.
Yeah.
Totally. Is trance hypnosis.
I'll tell you what's really a problem. Okay. A real problem at the minute is the news, because people are looking to the news for some sort of answers. Look, this is
which is ironic, because the news will only print what they're told to by the people who tell them what.
Well, aside from that, it's not just that, mate. It's also the fact that basically they're a business. They're there to make money, and they're there to keep you watching. And I sat watching the news yesterday, and it's like, this is nonsense. This isn't helping at all. It's just ramping up fear, ramping up sensationalism, making everyone terrified, blah, 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 blah. And then it struck me, it's like, well, of course they're doing that. They want you to stay there and keep watching so that you find out the next bit of useful information. Now, the problem at the minute is that this is exacerbated by the fact that because of this virus, or the sport's been cancelled, or the films have been cancelled, there's no celebrities going out and doing ridiculous things and stuff like that. The focus, there's one story in the entire medium of news at the minute. So there's nothing to take away from that. So not only have we got this constant churning of pressure, we've got no break from that. And this is causing either complete paralysis through the fear of it, basically going, oh my God, we're all doomed, or it's causing compassion fatigue on the opposite end, where people have gone, yeah, you keep telling me this, but I ain't seeing it out the window. So it's almost like a sort of mental car sickness. Do you know what I mean? Because like
yesterday, people have been asked to stay at home, and lo and behold, people going off to the seaside because the weather was good.
Madness. I don't understand the logic behind that, to be quite honest. Like the same thing. Friday night was mental as well when they knew that the pubs were shutting. Again, I feel for people to a degree, because, for example, all these pubs. I was chatting to a mate of mine who works as a sound engineer, and he was explaining to me the sort of the problems that are going to come off the back of this because of the way that they dealt with it. And the longer we muck about, the longer the fallout is going to be. And he was saying that basically when Glastonbury was cancelled, he says, like, that's it, we're done. You are not going to see a theatre production, a gig, a comedy show. You're not going to see any of these things, anything that has an audience, right, for the next year, because it's not. There's all sorts of like things that are problematic that most people don't really get. Like, for example, where you're storing all your sound equipment, all your speakers and your desks and things like that, you're having to pay for that. Most of this is on hire purchase, apparently, because it's such expensive equipment that nobody can afford to actually own one. And as soon as you do own one, it becomes obsolete. So what you tend to do is have a sort of hire purchase thing with the companies. And then when it gets a bit old, you swap it for the new one. And so you're constantly on the never, which is perfectly sensible until the point where you can't work for 6 months and you're having to still pay for that, and you're having to pay to store it somewhere, but you can't actually use it. And it's going to be the same for all these people that basically have burger vans or merch bars, or the people that provide security, or the people that provide like any of these things, like even the people that sell the tickets. like Eventbrite and Ticketmaster and stuff like that, because of the way that they get the money and produce tickets and stuff like that, they all of a sudden are going to have to pay this money back and not get it back. None of the festivals get paid until after the actual thing. So this is until after the actual festival's finished to avoid fraud. So this is why a lot of them might be like trying to postpone it in the sort of vain hope rather than cancel it, because the problem is the second they start giving money back that people have paid in tickets, you're still going to have to pay some of the bands, some of the people and stuff like that, and nobody's insured against it. Because COVID-19 is a new disease, there is probably about a very, very small percentage of people that have actually got insurance against this. So they're all just done. Venues are done, pubs are done, like sound engineers are done, like anybody that's got anything to do with that. A lot of bands are done. They're going to split up because it's not going to be financially viable. You can't get into rehearsals. Like my mate who runs a rehearsal studio, like he's like, well, what the hell are we going to do now? You're still having to pay council tax and rates on the building and stuff like that. But there's just nothing there. And the problem again is because we've got no coherent message. We've got Dominic Cummings.
In fairness to, well, I'm not saying in fairness to Boris because he's just the front piece, but in fairness to the British government, they have announced an amazingly decent financial support package for businesses. And also employees who are on PAYE getting at least 80% of the wage and stuff. The only people who seem to be left out at the moment are the freelancers, like musicians, entertainers, therapists, self-employed people.
Yeah.
Who haven't been,
No, I mean, hopefully, as I say, it'll all work out. The problem is that basically, like, whilst they're waiting for these measures to come in, it's already happening. Like I know a couple of people who felt that they need to take these loans that the government have given, and they know that they're just basically all they're doing is delaying the inevitable. But at the minute, they don't feel that they've got a response. And I said the problem is as well that basically, like, let's say that this is done within 3 months or something. They're not immediately going to go, oh, brilliant, okay, it's all cool. Now have a 50,000 people festival. Like, all of these pubs and stuff and venues and bars and stuff like that, they're all going to go under. So in 3 months' time, they won't be able to reopen. Is the point? It's gonna mess a lot of people up basically. So hopefully the government will step in and just say, here's an interesting thing. Like, all these people were terrified of encroaching socialism. They're quite happy to take these government handouts, are they?
Yeah.
It's almost as if they didn't really understand what socialism was, and some very rich industrialists had told them to be frightened of it.
Yeah, how strange.
Yeah.
The media may have painted people like Jeremy Corbyn as some kind of terrorist villain.
Well, this is it. And we're basically
people don't bother to do digging and check the truth of things, do they?
Well, this is it. And again, but again, it boils down to, rather than checking the facts, they go to an authority figure who tells them exactly what to think. And it never really works out terribly well like that.
Just because we're on the coronavirus, before we get back to mind control, but it does interlink, because obviously elements of mind control are used by the media to make people more scared.
Yeah. The media can be very responsible.
But I just made a couple of notes on the coronavirus. So let me just read these 6 bullet points out and tell me what you make of it. Okay. I saw a video dated the 21st of March 2020, so it was put up 2 days ago, on the YouTube channel Law of Liberty.
Right.
The video name is Bill Gates Microchip Vaccine Implants to Fight Coronavirus.
Yeah.
Then, because I never believe anything straight off, I went and searched, and lo and behold, I came up with articles galore in the so-called mainstream media that the mass populace believe, saying that he wants people to have microchips to track whether they've been given the vaccine or not, and all this. Yeah. Then, also, I came across, doing that, ID 2020, a project to get everybody chipped for various reasons.
Yeah.
Search ID 2020, and Bill Gates is linked to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then lo and behold, there was a mention of Event 201 that took place in October 2019, a trial run exercise for if there was a disease pandemic, a bit like coronavirus. And guess who's linked to that?
Well, it's the
Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah.
And then you look at things like Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, the plan to depopulate the planet by millions of people. And lo and behold, whose names keep coming up? Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah. I mean, like, the thing is, like, I just don't. What was quite interesting, so I only found out about this like yesterday, but as you say, it is in mainstream sort of. I think it was like Tech Advisor or something. I was reading it in, but even the mainstream.
Or in Forbes magazine.
Was it in Forbes?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Right, but even the ones that I was reading were going, hang on, this isn't right. Basically, the article that I read was, I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but here is a real one. And yeah, there is something. You know what's the thing is about
and also mandatory vaccinations. There's already places brought in laws that when there is a vaccine ready for coronavirus, that it will be mandatory for people to have it. No choice in the matter.
Well, quite, yeah. It seems over the top, doesn't it? Just like, you know.
That be the opportunity for the RFID chips.
Well, this is the point, isn't it? Like, I mean, it is the problem is. Right, now here's the weird thing, okay, like it works two ways, this sort of having a chip in you, because one is it basically can be tracked and stuff like that, and two is just like horrible, but like the concept, but it's collecting data. Now here's the thing, like basically he's already sort of like...
Before you say, a lot of people at home might, if you don't know what RFID chips are, they're smaller than the grain of rice and they could be injected into you without you knowing. Do your own research.
It's like it's a tracking thing. It's a radio frequency.
Like what you get put in your dog, so that if your dog gets lost, they can scan your dog and get it back to you. Yeah. Except you can fit a lot more on it than just the details of where the dog lives.
The thing is, it's all about like data, because basically this is the new sort of milieu. It's about trying to capture as much data as you can, and for example, right, okay, a friend of mine actually basically, like, he was doing the sound engineering at this Cambridge Analytica conference, and he says that basically the next, he's telling me all about it yesterday. Like, he tried to download a load of stuff, but it was so encrypted that he just couldn't get it onto his stick. But anyways, like, the gist of it was, what he was saying is that what they're going to start doing is they're going to start marketing products out. You say you go out and buy, like the example that he used was all right, Dave. The example that he used was say that I wanted to buy some guitar strings, so buy some guitar strings off Amazon or whatever. What they'll do is they'll send me they'll look at the type of plectrums that I use as well, and they'll just send me a pack of plectrums, and they'll say, if you want to, like, if you want these, keep them. If you don't want them, just pop them back into this free envelope and we'll send them back. But you've been charged for them already. And it's working on the idea that people either go, oh yeah, no, why not? Or alternatively, they're too lazy to just go across the street and stick it back into the thing. Now, that's a sort of very, very sort of minor example. But the more data people have about you, the more sort of, they know where you're going, they know what sort of things that you buy, you know what sort of habits you have, what sort of a person you are.
I think the best thing data-wise for people viewing, until they actually get your book, Cambridge Analytica, The Data Deception and the Web of Popularism, to describe it would be how Cambridge Analytica, SCL, harvested information from social media, especially Facebook, and then use that to target people around the world to arguably brainwash and manipulate and emotionally coerce them into who they wanted you to vote for.
Well, exactly, but this is the point. It's basically what they're doing is, once they've got this picture of you in the data and basically find out, in a very, very crude sense, find out what you like and what you don't like, They can basically say, like, let's say that you really like, I'm being really glib here, but like, let's say you're a Forest fan, right? Okay, and you really hate Derby County. Like, did you know that Donald Trump is a Forest fan? And you know that Hillary Clinton, she's a Derby County fan. Like, that's really, really simplistic and glib, but it's essentially that. What they'll do is they'll find things. They'll do the flip side. They'll find things that make you angry. Like, for example, with Donald Trump, they found very, very quickly that it was the idea of being threatened by things coming over the wall, by this idea of a nefarious deep state, by this concept of corrupt politicians, which is ironic because Donald Trump is the most corrupt politician. So what they did was, by collecting all this data and stuff like that, not only were they able to sort of like specifically like cater adverts to you, but then there was phrases like build the wall, lock her up, drain the swamp. Those were all basically, through quizzes and various sort of data mining techniques, they would found to be effective political slogans against Hillary Clinton as early as 2014. So this was
sound bites. That's the key. With radio, you get sound bites.
Yeah, take back control.
With hypnotherapy, effective in my experience is short, sharp phrases. So when I'm doing smoking cessation, I will, from this moment forward, whenever you see a cigarette on its tip in your unconscious, subconscious mind, you'll see the number 19, reminding you of the 19 deadly poisons in cigarettes. And instantly this phrase will jump into your mind. And it's the bullet point phrase of smoke, choke, death and disease. And smoke, choke, death and disease, and I ramped that pain in numerous times during the session. So it acts as a pain signal to avoid. But it's short phrases stick in. They don't get analysed as much by the critical faculty.
But now here's the thing, right? Okay, so this is how the data works, right? Now we're being manipulated to the point where basically, like, this is becoming normal. Like, I'll give you an example. Who's got a Fitbit on right now? Like, what do you think that data is doing? That's being sold to different companies that you wouldn't even imagine. And basically, they're going to highlight you. We'll do it really, really simple. They'll either show you a larger type of legging or a protein shake or something else. They'll market something at you based on your stats that are coming off the thing. Doing all these surveys, what type of a potato are you on Facebook? That's exactly how they got all the information. They're able to sort of draw this in, and like, for example, what it is at the minute, like a company like SCL, Cambridge Analytica, will approach Amazon and they'll go, if you gave us all your data, we could make you sell more of this product because we know how to sell all of this product. And they go, all right, brilliant. We'll give you all our data then. If you tell us we can make it profitable. So we've got all of Amazon's data. Once we've done that with Amazon, we can go to eBay and go, we were very successful with Amazon. If you wanted to sell more of this, all you need to do is give us your data. So we've got their data. So we're combining all of this. And then basically you've got a larger data set. I mean, just to give you an idea, and this was in 2016, Alexander Nix, who was the chairman of Cambridge Analytica, which is this company that basically, they stole all your data, they harvested it, and they created personalised advertising campaigns in order to make you vote in a particular way.
For people watching, Law, they registered as a British military-grade weapon.
Yeah, they've got a List X clearance, which basically means that they're able to hold documents marked secret and above, so top secret, and anything of that, they're allowed to have records on. They basically they can have any government records, right? They're also under export control by MI5, which means that basically this company, which is run by an ex-MI5, which has board members, including sort of Privy Council members, ex-Pentagon chiefs, Marconi Defence, British Psychological Intelligence, and all of this sort of stuff, which is technically a private company. It's under export control by the British intelligence, which means that basically it has to be signed off by members of the government before it can be used.
And at that point, let me put in it, you mentioned British Psychological. Here's the interesting thing. This brings us back to the Tavistock Institute, because interestingly, as you'll see in our documentary, Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, the head office in central London on a back street 4, the Tavistock Institute is in exactly the same building as the British Psychological Society that is for all the psychiatrists and stuff. There's always been, and there still is, a crossover between apparent psychiatry and mental health and the use of that for nefarious purposes.
Well, I mean, right at the very sort of beginning of the Tavistock, when like Edward Bernays and Walter Lippmann and stuff like that, they were sort of in conjunction with the Tavistock Institute through a company called Crewe House. And basically, it was utilising the sort of the newly sort of Freudian psychoanalysis and the ways of manipulation in order to use language and advertising in order to get people like into the concept of joining the war. Like basically the Second World War. So like they would introduce phrases like isolationists and collateral damage and stuff like that. There was even a suggestion that basically Tavistock were the first people to suggest doing sort of carpet bombing of civilians with the I forget which one it was. I think it was in Freiburg, Germany. Basically, just bomb a house. It's the bomb a house campaign, and this predated Guernica. So basically, the British military or Royal Air Force were bombing civilians before the Nazis were bombing civilians as a means of causing, you know, the loss of morale and stuff like that. But this is the point, that they take these psychological principles and they will apply it to populations in whatever manner that they can. So as you say, there's always been this sort of interaction between the groups, because this is it's not necessarily to denigrate the institution per se, because basically that is just the cream of the psychological crop. So basically there'll be lots of people who work for Tavistock who've never been involved in any of this sort of crap. Like
the majority won't know.
Yeah, just getting on with the job, doing like child psychology, helping people with this and that, and blah 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 blah. And there'll be basically an overriding thing at the top where they're saying, well, this is useful. But the point being that Cambridge Analytica it's listed and it is designated as a weapons grade communication tactic or a psychological warfare weapon. So it's a weapon. It's a propaganda weapon. It really, all it does is use sort of like tried and tested advertising techniques, but it's just honed down to such a very fine point. And is done in such a way that the people who are being targeted don't realise they're being targeted. Often they'll use things like sock puppet accounts on the internet, which is basically like just fake personas, and they'll chat to you about stuff in order to rile you up. And these are bots.
Often in the layman's terms, the videos they make, but sometimes they'll put together specific videos to target certain people, for example, that could be full of purely bullshit lies.
Oh, exactly. There's an institute called the Gatestone Institute, which is it's connected to Cambridge Analytica by sort of board members like Robert Mercer and Nina Rosenwald, who's the person that owns Steers, and Betsy DeVos, who's current Secretary of Education in America, and the sister of Eric Prince, who runs Blackwater. And they're also connected with Peter Thiel of Palantir fame. So again, you've got all these different sort of like data mining and sort of intelligence agencies who are sort of cross-contaminating. And what Gatestone Media did was they were putting out, as you say, just like complete nonsense videos in America, in swing states, particularly like the Bible Belt and stuff like that. And the videos genuinely showed Germany and France, they had fallen to Islam. Was the gist of this. I mean, obviously this didn't happen, but the gist of these things was that Al Qaeda or ISIS had taken over France and Germany, and now child marriage was allowed, and Sharia law was there, and people were being beheaded, and it's just nonsense. It was a real sort of like Red Dawn scenario. Like it was just totally ludicrous to anybody that sort of really knows the fact.
It's fake news, and yet the irony of it is the vast majority of fake news is manufactured by...
That was the whole point.
The governments.
Yeah, but that was the whole point of Trump doing it. Like I said this like a few years ago on Rich Planet. I said, look, if anybody else had said the phrases that Donald Trump had said, like fake news, if that had been in Cuba everybody had been like, oh, well, there you go. If it had been in like Korea, everyone would go, oh, there you go, or China, because these are the actions of a dictator. Now, again, I don't trust the media. I'm very well aware of the concept of like media bias, etc., etc., etc. The problem with the problem with the government designating which are considered like viable sources of information is that it's completely dictatorial. The problem with anybody limiting the scope of media output is,
I think it's more the other way, actually, Neil. I think the hierarchy goes, and I'll just throw this out there, and then you try and explain this to the viewers. I'm sure you will better than me. At the top of the tree, you've got your people we probably don't even know the names of. But for this example, I'm going to say your Rothschilds and your Rockefellers, the banksters, the money people.
Yeah.
And then there's people going down the tree, and then it comes to a point where you've got your media moguls.
Yeah.
And sort of like 80%, more like 90% probably of the world's media is owned by about 4 or 5 people.
Yeah.
An example of a major player is Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah.
In England. And Rupert Murdoch, he's worldwide with his media, but in England, he's backed, so to speak, every winning horse in every election for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah.
Basically, if he gets behind you, if his paper gets behind you, or his paper attacks the other people, then you're going to win.
Yeah.
And clearly he's told by the people above him, who ultimately are told by the banksters,
which was to back,
what to print, who to attack, and who to make the public like or turn against.
Yeah.
But then also he owns papers where he will put out the alternative narrative so that we can still have that confusion and disorientation and public argument amongst people going on, which makes everyone overall easier to manipulate.
Oh, yeah, totally. What I was saying was that basically the more you narrow the field of who produces this media or whatever, the less journalists of the world you have, the less likely you are to have a non-biased opinion. Like this is why you get people like a John Pilger or a Carl Bernstein or whatever that basically break away from the media or break away from their own sort of things and have to publish something in, say, Rolling Stone, like Bernstein did with the sort of CIA involvement in the media and stuff like that. Like if you narrow that field, you're less likely to get somebody that goes against the party line, is what I'm saying. And that is essentially what Trump is doing by saying only listen to Fox News. Like, don't listen to CNN, don't listen to blah, 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 blah. And again, whilst, of course, there are very, very legitimate criticisms of every media outlet, by doing that, what you're doing is you're just narrowing your sort of your potential for getting a real story out there. I mean, so you're totally right. You're on a losing. You're on a loser anyway, because basically, as you said, there's only so many people that actually overarchingly.
Murdoch's particularly successful at it, and it might sound as though I've got a personal gripe with Murdoch, and I have. Well, if you go to circusofthemind.net, you'll see what my personal gripe is. But he's employees, previous employees, and there's a saying in the media industry that once an employee of Murdoch, always an employee, i.e., you might not be on the payroll, but officially, but you still are, kind of thing. And David Cameron, former Prime Minister, he ended up getting advised by the guy who got done for phone hacking, Coulson. He ended up Coulson, done for phone hacking, ends up in number 10 as a PR advisor.
Do you know who replaced him?
Go on.
Dominic Cummings.
Yeah, exactly. He's also another Murdoch mouthpiece. Gove, Michael Gove, is it? Yeah, Gove. He used to work for Murdoch, be on the payroll.
And he was New Frontiers as well.
Yeah.
Like, this is it, same people. Now, here's the thing. There's a Michael Parente quote that basically perfectly sums this up, because a lot of journalists and stuff like that will get annoyed by what you've said. And what they said to Michael Parente was, this is ridiculous. I've worked in this industry for 20 years. Never once have they argued with what I've written. And that's because they like what you've written.
Yeah, if you write what they like, they're not going to argue with it. If you write what they don't like, occasionally it might get in if they can put it somewhere that it looks as though they're giving a different narrative or a bit of a balance. But if they don't like it, it just won't make the cut. And there's no journalist out there who can say that every single article they write when they're on the payroll for a paper makes it, because the simple fact is it doesn't happen that way. You submit, unless you're told to write a feature article, you submit articles,
and it might not.
And they pick the best, and then the others go. But it's perceived as they pick the best.
Yeah.
But also, it can be what suits their agenda most at the time.
Yeah, totally. I mean, again, this is the thing. You'd say we don't have a reliant media, like, because basically, like, you've got you say you've got CNN basically being totally anti-Trump, you've got Fox being totally pro-Trump, so you're not getting a coherent message from anything. What I find
police officers selling information to newspapers. You know, when you've got corrupt police officers in Scotland Yard selling stuff to newspapers, for example, which there is proof of, and that is one of the things that Leveson Inquiry Part 2 was supposed to look into.
The information wars got to the point where basically as well, like, everything is just so built on tropes and truisms rather than actual facts. Like, I guarantee if you went on Facebook right now and put what political sort of ideas does the BBC hold, and I bet you get hundreds and hundreds of people saying, oh, well, they're lefty, aren't they? They're obviously, like, they're practically communist, aren't they? And it's like, they're not, though, are they? Because they're run by the British, like, you know, they're run by the Ministry of Defence, essentially. They've got D notices. They've had Nigel Farage as the most consistent guest on Question Time. He hasn't even got a political party. They give a voice and a platform to Tommy Robinson. You've got Laura Kuenssberg, who, if she's not MI5, I'll cut my little finger off.
Let's be honest, people like Tommy Robinson and these people that pop up, you know, that apparently, you know, if they're doing stuff that, we'll say that when they do stuff that's illegal, obviously the full weight of the law should come down on them, obviously. Yeah. But then there's an argument about whether they should be given a voice or are they being racist. But the fact is, when you look closely, they get funding randomly from places.
Well, do you know where we know where Tommy Robinson gets it from? Rebel Media and Gatestone Media. You know, the media outlets that were doing this.
Which ultimately links back into Cambridge Analytica and stuff.
Yeah,
and if you go back further enough, to some degree, traces back to the British government, secret services, and Mossad, who are black cube, black box.
Black cube. Yeah, Mossad is the black cube is essentially the Israeli version of Cambridge Analytica. It's run by the same people. It's got a chap called Vincent Chengui, who's basically on the board of Cambridge Analytica and on the board of Black Cube. It's under export control by the IDF. And so
when you look at that, and also bear in mind when you examine and look, there's evidence there that the likes of your Rothschilds funded, the banks funded both sides of all major wars. So they gave money to the enemy as perceived.
Well, I mean,
they're all one, aren't they?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the main thing that Black Cube did was it basically did the campaign for Viktor Orban, who's the dictator of Hungary at the minute, basically. And it's very strange that he's being put forward as like this concept, like of being. It's all lies. He's basically one of the architects of this, the refugee crisis, blah 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 blah. And complaining that it's encroaching on European culture, which is strange because basically he caused it. Like, aside from the fact that he's been put in place by Mossad on a like a complete throne of lies and just nonsense, he's the person that basically caused the crisis a couple of years ago, because rather than all these refugees were going on trains through Hungary, right? They weren't supposed to stop in Hungary. Hungary had said, we're not taking any refugees. And people have gone, well, that's a bit selfish, but fine, whatever. They're on the way to here, and here. What Viktor Orban did was he'd stop the trains in Hungary, put them all onto coaches in their thousands, send them to France, Spain, and Germany, and just leave them there. Right, causing the problem, causing the actual problem. And then he goes on the television and goes, well, this is George Soros. And it's like, come on. Yeah, interesting. Victor Orban actually had his education paid for him by George Soros.
Right.
Yeah, George Soros, all this stuff about George Soros, like George Soros had done more for Hungary than anybody else. He just like stripped out the old communist thing. He put huge amounts of his own money into public sort of thing, you know, building leisure centres, that type of thing. In Hungary, George Soros was a hero, because he's basically one of the people that was stripping away the vestiges of the old totalitarian communist regime. And so it's very, very interesting to me to see all the stuff that comes out against George Soros, because it is admitted Mossad propaganda. It came from two lawyers called Finkelstein and Birnbaum, and they've come out on record and said, we're surprised that people bought this, because almost everything that we've said about George Soros, the opposite was true. Now, this isn't me defending George Soros or saying that he's a very good person or whatever, but all of this tying him together with the migrant crisis and trying to destroy various places like Macedonia and blah, 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 it's just not true. It turns out that the opposite is true. Now, I still think that he's actually a CIA agent and they used his money to overthrow the former Yugoslavia. I don't think he's a good person, but for example, he, like in right-wing media, they're trying to say that basically it was George Soros that was behind the colour revolution in the Ukraine, where, you know, Poroshenko was put in, and there was that sort of like proxy war against Russia, where Poroshenko was ended up being thallium poisoned or whatever it was that he was poisoned with, I forget. But if you go on SCL's website, which doesn't exist, but if you use the Wayback Machine and go on SCL's website, they proudly admit to being responsible for the colour revolution. So it was Cambridge Analytica. So again, you've got this, basically, you've got Mossad, you've got a series of very, very right-wing politicians that are basically got this encroaching control mechanism where they basically, you've got people in, like, you've got Alice Waddell, you've got Victor Salvini, you've got Victor Orban, Matteo Salvini, sorry, you've got the guy in Czechoslovakia, you've got Geert Wilders, you've got Nigel Farage, and to a lesser extent Boris Johnson, you've got people in Nigeria, Kenya, you've got Modi in India, right? All of these people are being positioned as anti-establishment, men of the people fighting against this horrible left-wing conspiracy. And if you look at it, every single one of those people is financed by the same people. Every single one of those people uses against-own media. Every single one of them is connected to the free market think tanks, which are run by the CIA and MI5, like the IFT, like the Heritage Foundation, like the Adam Smith Institute. Every single one of them has the exact same policies. Not a single one of them has a nationalistic policy, and yet they're all basically running on this concept of nationalism, not actually promoting anything nationalistic, just telling you that other people are coming over the border and they're going to be brown and different. And so that's what people don't like. What's strange to me is that basically you get this coordinated effort. And if you take a step back, you go, oh, this is nonsense, isn't it? This is a con, right? Okay. And all of these different people are basically connected to this same mind control experiment, for want of a better phrase. And
so they're all connected, and the evidence is there, and especially people don't take any of what I'm saying or Neil's saying as read. Independently research it. I have done, and I can tell you he's right. And if you want a good starting point, again, I mention his books, Your Thoughts Are Not Your Own, Volume 1 and 2, and in particular, Cambridge Analytica, The Data Deception and the Web of Popularism, all of which are available at the link neilsandersmindcontrol.com that will be below this video. But the evidence is there that they all root back, whether it's media moguls, they're being controlled by the money people. Whether it's politicians, they're being controlled by the money people. The money people, the banksters, your Rothschilds, your Rockefellers, and all this. Now, there may even be people above them that we don't even know the names of, that we haven't seen.
Probably.
But is this effectively, this is the so-called Illuminati?
Yeah, for want of a better expression, this is the point. Like, it's one of these weird things where the people, I mean, there are things like obviously Bohemian Grove and Last Circle and Bilderberg and stuff like that. Whether they get together and have headed notepaper that says Illuminati and go, oh, John, we're going down Illuminati Club next week or anything like that. I think the concept is like, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I've seen a lot of evidence.
Well, there was the Bavarian Illuminati that
Yeah.
blatantly was, but then the concept of that was to infiltrate the Freemasons around the world.
Yeah, I mean,
an invisible hiding inside another society.
You've got incredibly wealthy people at the top end of society that wish to stay at the top end of society, and they don't wish to change their wealth. Now, I am more leaning towards the sort of, it's more a bit, I keep saying it's a bit more like sort of Mount Olympus, in as much as basically you've got all these gods who are a bit crap, really. They're not like all powerful. They often make mistakes and stuff like that, and they're vying against each other. They're all right because they're all going to stay on Mount Olympus, but it's like who's got the best seat, so to speak. And so at the minute you've got a load of very right-wing people, Heritage Foundation, Christian evangelicals and stuff like that, through things like Cambridge Analytica and the sort of right-wing aspects of the British military establishment. They're trying to sort of impose a certain type of thing. At some point you'll get somebody else that's like Tom Steyer or whatever, who's a left-wing billionaire that's going to come in, like, and you'll get the Hillary crap and stuff like that. But the fundamental things, and this is one of the things that annoys me about when people say, oh, it'd be much worse, thank God, Donald Trump's not perfect, but it'd be much worse under Hillary. And it's like, how? Oh, we'll be at war. Well, we are at war. America's currently at war with 8 different countries, right? Okay. Donald Trump upped drone strikes against civilian targets by about 200%, right? And Obama was a maniac for that. Trump is far, far worse. It's just that nobody seems to be paying any attention to what he's doing. He's also introduced a law that means that America no longer reports civilian deaths caused by American military, which essentially means that they're covering up war crimes. The other things that he's done is roll back workers' rights, roll back environmental protections, roll back corporate oversight, and he's also basically given a massive, massive tax break to the top 1%.
He's doing what he's told to do, isn't he? Because he was kind of auditioned for the job, wasn't he?
He was. In fact, he was absolutely auditioned in front of the Heritage Foundation and the CNP, and they basically made sure that he implemented their policies, which were from the Mandate for Leadership, which is a policy document that they produce every single time that there's an election. And thus far, he's done 65% of what they've asked him to do, which means basically they're quite happy to sort of let him go now, to be quite honest, because he's basically done everything that they want him to do. But what gets me is that blindness where basically, regardless of the facts as are presented, people are still clinging on to it would be worse if we were with Hillary Clinton. It's like, no, it wouldn't be worse if we were with Hillary Clinton. It would be exactly the same. Exactly the same. And that's what gets me.
I couldn't agree with you more, but this segues on my notes into why would people, and there's people who get into politics, they have the best of intentions, they genuinely do, and they'd love to do what they can to change the world, and but then randomly they'll get exposed in the media for being gay, or they'll get framed for underage sex, or some scandal will come out to discredit them and ruin it because they tore the party line.
Well, they'll die with a pair of stockings on their head and an amyl nitrate laced orange shoved in their mouth. And it's like, that was a real one as well. Or they'll fall off a cliff whilst hiking. The
question is this, and it links back again, because all of this does link back to Tavistock Institute and MK Ultra. Mm-hmm. MK Ultra, trauma-based mind control, sexual abuse, mind control slaves. Yeah. The idea that through trauma you can compartmentalize somebody's brain. Conventional psychiatry calls it multiple personality disorder. But that this can be done purposely, so you can have trigger words or images to open up the one personality that gets sexually abused, for example, and doesn't remember it and gets handed around as a sex slave to politicians, so that can be filmed secretly by the powers that be, banksters, to use as compromat, blackmail material to get what they want.
Yeah, Sidney Gottlieb was doing this in the 60s, basically. It was admitted in in a presidential committee, there was at least 3 girls that received an apology for this. Claudia Mullin was one. Christine Dinacola was another one. I can't remember the other lady's name off the top of my head, but essentially they were sort of children, sort of 7, 9 years old. They were being trained to be prostitutes, and the whole point of that was, as you quite rightly say, to sort of entrap business leaders and other politicians and that type of thing. And it's remarkably similar to the Epstein thing. I mean, like, I've been talking about this for quite a few years, but basically the Epstein was transporting underage prostitutes across borders into countries on private jets and stuff like that. The sort of stuff where you just can't get away with that, like, normally. And then it's found that all of his properties, and like his islands and his Malibu beach hut and stuff like that, beach huts, it's a mansion, like, they're all wired for sound. And this is the point, basically, like, there seems to be dignitaries there and like high profile celebrities, and it seems to be, as you say, a sort of a blackmail type scenario where basically people are filmed in compromising situations, and then that's used.
It was just America's Jimmy Savile.
Yeah,
we had the British TV presenter Jimmy Savile, and it appears, he had links, friends with royalty, powerful politicians. He was given the keys to bloody Broadmoor mental.
It's the fact that he was the biggest one is the fact that he got the knighthood and that he was vetted to spend so many Christmases with Margaret Thatcher, like, because the amount of background research that they do before they give someone a knighthood is just astonishing. Right, I'll give you an example. Right, okay, my mate's dad is an engineer, and like when we were at school, he was offered a job for the MOD, like, and he didn't tell us much. The only one that he told us about this missile that would hit a tank, and the explosion was so there's something about the explosion that was so sort of reactive that it sucked all the oxygen out of the air, and it in such a way that the tank would collapse in on itself and crush everybody inside. So like these are the sort of mental levels of thought that are going on to it. Anyway, he got limousine, basically they almost black bagged him. He was just walking to work one day and the black limousine pulls up and military guys get in the back, Dave, like, and seriously, he was taken off and interrogated for ages, basically saying, so we know about this affair that you've been having. Are you going to come clean about it, or are we going to tell your wife? Now, he hadn't been having an affair. These were just tactics that they were seeing to see how he would crack. And over the next couple of weeks, he'd have friends phone you up and say, who the hell are you working for at the minute? Because we've had police and military intelligence and people phoning up asking about your background and seeing if there's anything we can blackmail you with and all the sorts of stuff. So the point being that if they were that thorough about somebody that is just working as an engineer on sort of experimental weapons systems and stuff like that, what do you think they're going to do with somebody that they're going to like give a knighthood? Like, they're going to be very, very, very thorough. So the very idea that it was an open secret, what Jimmy Savile was getting up to, and the people who vetted him for a knighthood and to see if that he was safe to go and eat at Chequers didn't know this. I mean, it's nonsense. Like Peter Morrison, who was an aide to Thatcher, who was it? It was Edwina Curry wrote a letter to Thatcher saying, he's a good man, but I'm a bit worried that he's a pederast. Right? And it's like, what? That like, and they just said, I'll be fine, it's all right. And then who was the other guy? The whip, Michael something, I forget his name, but he's on record saying, well, if you've got a problem, you get caught with young boys, something like that, come to us, we'll help sort it out. And it's like, zero respect.
It did go on because proof's come out now, hasn't it, that MI5 intervened to cover up the likes of Cyril Smith, the British MP.
And there was something, I mean, again, I don't know with this, the recent guy, the guy that basically, I forget his name, the bloke that was talking about all the audience that has now been thrown in prison for lying and stuff like that.
Oh, he was going on about Al Mouse Guestdales and
yeah. Now there's something a bit strange about that.
Death.
There's something very strange about that, in as much as now he may well be lying, because basically all the stuff that he found, like you or I could have found on the internet. I don't know about that, but the one thing that got me in that case was somebody stepped on it to make sure that Harvey Procter, because Harvey Procter was one of the people accused of it, he's got previous form for being with underage rent boys. That was purposely kept out of the current discussion around that. But I don't know why. And Grenville Janner as well, basically now they're saying, yeah, well, it looks like he did do all that stuff, didn't he? But he's dead now, so there's nothing we can do about it.
Well, I'm
pretty sure that will come out that the same thing about Leon Britton will come out in years, in a few years down the line, that basically, oh, no, actually, it looks like he was a little bit, adventurous.
Yeah. Now, it may be, some of these people that get exposed, it may be that they were not naturally inclined that way, and they were coerced, drugged, and then put into situations initially for them to get compromat material, and then forced to do it again, because otherwise the compromat material they had would be released.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. I mean, like, there's all sorts of ways that you can get somebody into bother, and governments kill people. They're not like at the drop of a hat. They'll kill thousands of people if it serves their sort of purposes, and justify it. So if you don't think that they'll basically ruin the lives of a couple of people in order to get whatever favourable conditions going on for them, then I'm sorry, you're a bit naive as to how the world runs. I mean, it's very, very sort of complicated how these things, how all of these things go, basically, as well, and then you find that the world's even more complicated than that, and like people that basically that you might think have like a perfectly legitimate. Do you know that a lot of Palestinian groups that are sort of fighting in the suppression of the Israeli state, they're actually financed by Nazis, like proper Nazis, like Janou, who's the guy that basically financed Carlos the Jackal and the Algerian sort of resistance fighters and stuff like that. And the reason he's doing it is because he just simply doesn't like Jewish people. And then you've got other people in the CNP who are hardcore Nazis that actually sort of quite like the concept of Israel, because Israel's got, for want of a better phrase, the emergence of an ethno-state or a very sort of self-contained hierarchical order, kind of quasi-apartheid. And so this is the point. It's like life is massively, massively more complicated than people think, and there's loads and loads of people behind the scenes manipulating you. But this is the point. It's hypnosis. It's mind control. It's getting people basically looking at just the surface aspect of it and reacting to that, rather than thinking in the same way that basically you react to this guy's finger and you're getting more quiet and more quiet and blah 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 done. And it doesn't work if you're sat there going, oh, I know what he's doing. He's trying to distract with his
fixation of attention on one thing to the exclusion of everything else.
This is the point.
Critical faculty bypass. Now that's the description for hypnosis, but also it's the description for fixate or argue over this thing amongst yourself, populace.
Exactly.
So you're distracted from this and you're not analysing it.
Yeah, and when does hypnosis not work? When they actively try and resist it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, obviously there's ways of getting around it and stuff like that, but that is the ways and means that you can. No, you're not going to hypnotize me because I'm sat there and doing it.
Low level, no offense to people watching, low level hypnotherapy or stage hypnosis. Yeah, if the person purposely goes, you're not hypnotizing me, unless you suddenly use a real shock, fear, and interrupt type induction, you're unlikely to get them. If you use the kind of trauma-based mind control techniques, or rather the principles of them, of emotional manipulation, then you very easily can bypass those types of people.
In the same way that a magic trick, if you've seen the behind the scenes and you know that that lady's actually just pulled her legs up to her chest and you've not cut her in half, it's far less. It's far less. I'm going to get kicked out of the magic circle now. It's far less impressive. Do you know what I mean? It's far less impressive. And in the same way that basically these manipulation techniques, if you take a step back and you go, oh, I see what you're doing. You're trying to make me frightened of Muslims so that you can do this, right? Then it doesn't work. In the same way. So basically, in the same way that basically if you've got an idea of their intent, you can fight against it. That's what I'm saying, is that basically not dissimilar to the ways and means that you could the ways and means advertising becomes ridiculously pointless when you go, so hang on, you're selling me to this on the understanding that Wayne Rooney also wears them. I give a shit about Wayne Rooney, and then all of a sudden it's powerless.
However, I've got to say, in terms of marketing, advertising, promotion, sales, you have got to treat yourself to a copy of Neil's DVD, The Dark Art of Marketing, subtitled Welcome to Sell, as in Welcome to Hell. It is tongue-in-cheek, it is hilarious, but it is scaringly true. One of the best exposés of how people are emotionally manipulated to take money off.
Thank you very much for that. That's very kind of you. But yeah, this is the point. I think this is the point. This is what we've been talking about the whole point. It's about manipulation, and manipulation either works on sort of a lie, like it's too good to be true, or it's on fear, like the sky is falling or whatever. And I think these are the best ways of dealing with these types of manipulation, is by being to an extent dispassionate about it, by separating yourself from it and trying to get the overarching picture rather than the sort of, like, as you say, the focus. Because if that's the whole point, they're trying to make you focus on this so that they don't notice this, and I think that is the most sort of effective technique for it all, is basically just remain calm and try and think about what it is that they're actually doing, because everything is sort of in like massive extremes. Like, this is why everyone's gone down to the shop, because basically it's like, oh, I need to like get enough food to live on.
Don't get scared by it. What we're saying is true. Be aware of it, but don't let it scare you, because the thing is this: then they can still win, because fear is a state where you're in that fight, flight, freeze mode, and you become more suggestible.
Yeah.
So don't be scared by it. You've got to just look at the facts and go, well, that's going on. What can I do? And be calm about it. Because with this coronavirus thing, tying it all together, the media are instilling fear into people. And ironically, when people are in fear and the fight, flight, freeze thing produces more cortisol in the body, your immune system actually lowers.
Right.
So you're more likely to catch something than you would have done, or if you get it, you're more likely to have a more adverse effect to it than you would have done if you were calm and relaxed. Breathe deeply in through your nose, out through your mouth. Follow a bit of meditation or self-hypnosis, because when you're calm and relaxed, your immune system can be boosted.
That makes sense, right? Okay, I know this sounds ridiculous, right? Okay, but it's true. There's a girl, and she's got this condition where for some reason she has absolutely no fear of anything, and she's been ran over about 6 times, like properly ran over, like wheels gone over her and everything, and she's never broken a bone. Full cars have gone over this girl many times, and because she has no fear, she doesn't tense up. I know this sounds ridiculous, but it's a very extreme example of what you're saying. She doesn't tense up, she doesn't react, so she just, and it's like, what? And because of that they assume, this is why this girl seems to be sort of, to a degree, impervious to harm, because she has no fear of it. Which is a lot
of people, when they're completely pissed out of their head,
fall down some steps
and they're a bit sore the next day, but they've not broken any bones yet. If they were sober and did the same thing, could they tense up through fear, they'd end up in hospital.
Yeah, it's the overthinking of it sometimes, isn't it, as well? Like that's the point. I mean, there's that famous story as well of the Napoleonic Wars of the gentleman who like got his leg blown off by a cannon, and because he didn't realise it, he just carrying on until somebody pointed out.
Well, it's true. You can be cutting vegetables. Everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people probably had that experience. You're cutting stuff, and you might be talking to someone. You might turn, and you've cut yourself, but you don't actually know you have.
Until you see it.
Your finger, you see it, that moment, that second, your brain signal goes, I've cut myself, and you go, panic, and suddenly it starts throbbing and all that.
Yeah. Yeah,
well, as hypnotists, we can help you reprogram your mind, your personal laptop computer, to effectively turn off that negative signal to overcome the pain, which is what you do with people who've got long-term arthritis or not. So on the one hand, it is a lot more simple than it may appear. On the other hand, it's a lot more complicated. As the people at home, as therapists, you may never have thought about the fact that at the root it's about emotional manipulation. The way I teach hypnosis in the boot camp is about pain, pleasure, about being pain or pleasure, fear or laughter, being scared or relaxed. It's about the extremes and manipulating that person's current beliefs, thoughts, emotions and ideas to take them where they need to be or want to be when it's being done with positive intent.
Yeah.
We've also talked in the past hour or so about how the powers that be, your Tavistock Institute, your MK Ultra projects, your secret services, PSYOPs, use these techniques to instill fear in people, to distract you from what's going on over here, to make you believe things that you wouldn't have normally believed. And that is why one of the biggest favours you could do yourself is go to neilsaundersmindcontrol.com, the link below this video, and get Neil's books and DVD. Study them. I promise you, don't believe a single word of it until you've independently researched it yourself. I've done that, and I would say everything in there is true, but I encourage you to find the truth for yourself. Also, I would recommend the second link below this video that you go and rent the documentary Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis. Neil's in it, I'm in it, Gareth Icke, David Icke's son's in it, Dr. Robin Kelly, and you will see examples of how in education, politics, the political system, religion, all areas of life, these techniques are being used to arguably brainwash, manipulate and control.
That is a really good documentary. Like, I know I'm in it, but I am very much a supporting player. But I've watched it a couple of times. It's very informative, but it's a great documentary. It takes you on a journey. It's really quite poignant, I found as well. I was very surprised when I first watched it to see some of the content on there. And it's really good. It's really, really good film.
Cheers, and thanks for being. And you said he wasn't in it much, but the truth, what's in there, it's quality, as you will see when you go there. Which is one of the reasons why, having read Neil's books, watched his DVD, seen his contribution, and also go on YouTube, type in Neil Saunders, and wow, he's been on numerous podcast interviews and stuff, and always gold. So check them out as well. Neil, it has been an absolute pleasure. I think I had numerous notes galore, and we have actually covered everything on this list.
Excellent.
So, by the way, there is also a website, iconic.com.
Yeah.
ICKONIC.com. It's a pay-to-view, a yearly subscription site, but you can get your first 30 days for free trial at the minute. And on Neil has got a series called The Programme, which is again the same tongue-in-cheek comedic presentation as his Welcome to Sell DVD, but covering mind control in all its areas and facets in the world. And I must get to see that at some point, because I'm not actually a member of Iconic at the moment.
Oh, right, fair play. I'm quite pleased with the way that series turned out. We didn't have a huge amount of time to write it or even to film it, so it's a little rushed, but I'm still quite pleased with the way it turned out. Mostly to say I had a very good director and editor as well. So.
Well, Richard Alexander Willett was involved in that, who also was involved in the production of Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis.
Yes. Yeah.
So thank you, Neil, for setting aside this time in your massively busy schedule, as we're on pretend lockdown.
Well, technically I'm at work, so don't tell anybody that I did this, all right?
That could be problematic. I was going to put it live later. We didn't film this on the 23rd. We filmed this on Sunday the 22nd.
It's all right. It's all right. It's all going on up here. I'm working in my head.
Excellent. Thank you, Neil. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks to you again for another edition of Hypnosis Week at hypnosisweek.com. Check out the links below this video. Grab Neil's books. We'll see you again soon. Bye for now.